In today's session, we're looking at doing this kind of amazing, totally amazing thing, which can help us turn things like a pregnant wife problem into a mathematical equation. And would you like to know how to turn a personality problem into a mathematical equation? Or perhaps how to turn a problem into a solution without having to get into it, without having to pull open a calculator? You're going to love this session. But Chris, you wanted to share something?
I did. Thank you, Adrian. Lovely to see everybody here. There's this guy who's walking down the street and he falls into an open hole on the sidewalk. A man walks by, a doctor, and he says, Doctor, it's me down here. I need help. I need a hand. Can you help me out? The doctor writes out a prescription, throws it down into the hole, and moves on. A priest walks by, and the guy in the hole says, Father, it's me. I'm down here and I need help. Can you help me? The priest, he writes out a prayer, throws it down into the hole, and moves on. Then a coach walks by, and he says, Hey, it's me. I'm down here. Can you give me a hand? And the coach jumps down into the hole. And the guy says, What are you doing? Are you crazy? Now we're both stuck down here. And the coach says, Let me tell you a story about a man who felt trapped in his life with no way out, and how he was able to find his own way out. Telling your client answers that they need in ways that they don't necessarily understand is incredibly powerful for us as coaches and NLP practitioners. If you can deliver your message to the person who you're talking to, whether it's an NLP lesson or a coaching lesson or just a lesson to someone who needs a hand, you will be an incredibly powerful communicator. And the art of storytelling is the difference between someone who's an acceptable communicator and those people that inspire and transform. And tonight, in the space of 3 hours, we are going to turn you into such people with some very straightforward processes. I'm not at all excited. Absolutely not. Let's go back a step and work out what a metaphor is, or at least what we think a metaphor is.
What is a metaphor?
It is a linguistic device, typically used in poetry or storytelling, where you say something is something else. That boy is however you want to describe him. Or you've got wood in front of your eyes for Yolanda's metaphor. Sometimes people will include the idea of a simile, which is saying something is something, like the boy is as brave as a lion.
Money is the root of all evil.
That's a good one.
I heard that one today.
Mm-hmm. But basically, using comparisons. That's it.
That can be part of it. Yeah, and it can go further. Like right now, you go into some restaurants and they're there with a little gun and they point it at your head to tell it to check your temperature. They get a little gun and they point it right at your forehead and they go, how do you feel when someone does that?
Nothing.
I'm glad I don't have any veterans in here because a lot of veterans might get triggered by it. Even non-veterans may get triggered by it. And if you ever had a gun pointed at you, it's not a really nice sensation, but it happens rather quick, so it often just goes over the head. But having a gun pointed at you can be a scary thing. And people walk into restaurants and someone could be pointing one of these, getting a temperature reading from their head. And some people take a lot of offense for it. They're like, are you aware of the symbolism in there? So symbolism is like a metaphor. They're coming close. In fact, some people could even say that money, no, I wouldn't really say money is a metaphor, but possibly we're dealing with open definitions. One of the best things I heard about a metaphor is having a shower. Having a shower can be a process of washing or cleansing your body It could be of just dirt, or it could be everything from the day. So if you like to, you could think of the shower as being a self-hypnosis or a metaphor or a place you go to clean your body, mind, and soul or quickly. But today we're focusing more on a bigger concept of metaphor, isometric metaphor, or we're using a story to help create change with our clients. For example, for the parents in the room, you may end up telling a story to your kids about Christmas. And why do we tell our kids stories about Santa Claus? Why do we tell our kids stories specifically about Santa Claus? I think it's maybe tradition. I think it's also a way to manipulate children to get this concept of good and bad, rather than just is. But what about crafting stories specifically for our clients to help them create change? What if you're going to be a speaker or perhaps you're leading classes of 4 to 5 kids or 4 to 5 people learning English. Rather than just teaching them English, or rather than just teaching the kids A, B, C, or A for apples or B for bananas, you could actually teach the kids A for angry, B for break. When you're angry, have a break. We could actually use metaphors to deliberately teach concepts. We could use metaphors to help our clients have breakthroughs. Now imagine if you are teaching a group of kids, or you're teaching a group of people English, and they've hired you to teach them English, but instead of just teaching them A, B, C, D, you've actually given them stories, and they leave your sessions like, I feel so good. I feel so confident. Yeah, what if you are to speak in front of a group of people, and rather than just tell them, well, I wanted to make some money, I started coaching. What if you were able to tell them a really engaging story about stone soup and nonverbal communication? And what if you were to take your audience on a journey?
When you have the ability to tell a story, you as a coach or an NLP practitioner, you lower the resistance of the person who you're speaking to, and you increase the rate of retention of the message you're trying to get through. Telling someone a story is an opportunity for you to connect with them that bypasses the logical part of their brain. Because it's not about giving them a set of instructions, A, B, C, D. It's about entertaining them, or inspiring them, or educating them, but using a different process from the one that they use all day, every day. Almost everyone here would have heard the Aesop's fable of the hare and the tortoise. The hare takes off, and he's so far ahead that he sits down to take a break, and the turtle just wanders by while he's sleeping and wins the race. The moral of the story, slow and steady wins the race. But there's more than just that one moral from that story. Is there a lesson to be learned there about arrogance or hubris? If you think that you're so far in front, is that a good reason to take a break? Maybe there's a message in there too. And so if you're wanting to get a message through to someone, you can either tell them, don't be arrogant, or you can tell them a children's story that conveys a similar message, but is hidden behind a couple of layers that they may not be necessarily resistant to initially, but instead retain that lesson, saying, well, feel like I've done a lot today. I'm going to take a break. But if I take a break, someone might come past me. My competition may overtake me. I really can't afford to be complacent now. Which is so much more effective than telling someone, keep working, work harder. Because that is an instruction. And how many people like being told what to do?
Jumping ahead a fraction, if we are to use the client's language or the client's representational systems, would make the metaphors even better, wouldn't we? So if the client is a very visual person, then you might want to put a lot more visual language into your story. And perhaps the rabbit, envisions a lot of things or stuff like that. Where if the person is a very auditory, perhaps in the story, the rabbit has a lot of self-talk or talks a lot. Or if the person is a very feeling person, maybe the rabbit was feeling something and then later on he was feeling something else. So you put a lot of representational systems relevant to the client into the character you want them to possess. So the rabbit could be very feelings-based. The tortoise could be in real life, the rabbit would probably be very visual and fast, and the tortoise would be very feelings-based.
What about if I told you a story of some people who were so restricted in their life and they didn't have any creative outlets, and then all of a sudden one day they saw an entirely new way to look at the world and realized that creativity was all around them, and that you could take curtains from your living room, cut them up and turn them into outfits to go wandering in the country and see something entirely new. Do you think that might be a nice little lesson that you could slot in there? Just extracting that from The Sound of Music and throwing it in to someone else who says, my life is so boring. I have nothing creative around me. I'm just crying out for an opportunity to express myself. Let me tell you about a story of a woman who fashioned some curtains into clothing for children. Does anybody else have a movie that really resonates with them? Maybe Rusty? You look like a man who might enjoy something like, I don't know, The Matrix.
The client is trying to relate. Hang on, coach, I've got a problem here, and you're telling me a story about a frog laying eggs. What the hell does a frog laying eggs got to do with my problem? So this person's thinking, I've got a problem, I've got to step up, and the coach is telling me a story about frogs laying eggs. What the hell does that have to do with me? And the unconscious is the supercomputer. The supercomputer is looking for meaning. The supercomputer is looking for meanings in the frogs and tadpoles and making up their own meanings. Okay? But there's also a level of ecology, and we can make up stories on the spot, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to make up some stories on the spot. And in our stories, we're going to be dramatic. Right here, we're going to get into groups amongst us, and we're going to tell some kind of story. Chris may give some exact instructions, but basically we're going to tell some stories, and we may have some play, some movement in our body. Okay? Stone soup. Stranded in water. And Rusty will back this up, and anyone here that's taught kids will know that when you teach kids, and adults are exactly the same, when you can use range of movement, it's more entertaining, isn't it?